Welcome to the Hen House Podcast, where mothers rise together in authentic conversation and sacred connection. With your hosts, Chantal Breanne and Andrea Sjoeberg. It's time to jump into the Hen House.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Welcome back, everyone. We're so glad to have you here today. We have a really exciting topic talking about becoming an informed consumer of health. And this is a really big topic. And so we're going to kind of dive in and see where we all end up with this. So, yeah,
Super relevant today, too.
Yeah, I know we had been talking when choosing a topic for this week. We had kind of said, like with everything that's been happening, like with the march that just happened at Kellogg's headquarters, that the food babe, whose first name starts with a V, who I forget, Vani or Varney, anyway, Vani maybe, something like that, that she was leading to say, hey, like, why are there food dyes in our cereal when in Canada and in Europe, you don't make it with petroleum-based products? Like, what's going on? And so I just thought, this is really, really relevant. And I think as moms who are concerned about health, this becomes just really important to understand and to kind of come up with a strategy for making good choices. And
yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because there's been a lot of controversy over what she posted, but she's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And I followed her for a long time. And I'm shocked that there's been a lot of pushback over what she said.
Right. It's, and it's interesting, right? So here's, from my perspective, I think we're all aware that there are toxic things in our environment, and some of us care more than others.
Right.
And so I think that there's kind of from my perspective, a few basics that fundamentally help understand what's going on. And so for me, the first one is that there are toxic things in our environment, and big companies, their primary purpose is to make money and make money for their shareholders. That's their primary responsibility as a company. It's not to create the safest, best, most quality product. It's to make money. And I think people sometimes get confused about that. So just because they're marketing something as healthy doesn't mean that it is. I think too, there's been so much money and time spent researching the psychology behind making people buy more. And in fact, in the grocery store, do you want to know where the Fruit Loops and the Cocoa Puffs and whatever all are? Perfect eye level of children. They're made with bright colors and fun birds. It's like the fun cereal, because they want kids walking through there with their parents to say, I really, really need this. And to become insistent so that the parents will buy it.
Right.
Right? There's really a lot of time and effort spent going into the psychology behind marketing. How do we get people to buy more? How do we get kids to want what we're selling?
Right.
Right. So I think those are fundamentals. And then I think the third fundamental is that while the regulatory agencies, and I'm kind of saying in the US right now, but in most countries, they do definitely stop some products. However, I would say for certain, their standard of what's allowed and what's okay is far, far, far from my standard.
Yeah.
So what they allow in products as safe is from my perspective, sometimes quite questionable.
Yeah.
But everyone gets to decide for themselves, what's okay and what isn't. And sometimes it takes decades to get something to change. Like just recently, there was a really huge case that was won regarding fluoridation in water. And it was essentially in court, quote unquote, proven in court, for what that's worth. That's not necessarily scientifically proven, but there was enough science and expert witness and whatnot that the verdict went to the way of saying, yes, fluoridation in water is harmful to children because it's been shown well enough to win a court verdict that it decreases IQ in children. Exposure to fluoridated water. And yet, how long have people been concerned with fluoride? A pretty long time. So it can take decades and the regulatory agencies still haven't necessarily changed because this just happened like a few weeks ago, this verdict.
Oh, wow.
But now there can start to be pressure on local communities and stuff like that. And, but again, bureaucracy moves really slowly.
Yeah.
So just because something is found to be true or believed to be highly true and change is thought to be needed doesn't mean that things will change right away. It can take a really long time. And
right.
So I think like that for me is kind of like those are some concepts to keep in mind for like how to begin to look at things, like basic understanding.
Yeah, and I think that for some people, they put a lot of trust in corporations and the government, so they don't even think to question it. Because when I have discussed this with people who maybe don't think about it or care so much about it, they just assume that it has to be safe because otherwise it wouldn't be allowed or it wouldn't be sold. And it's interesting because it's not exactly mainstream to some of these things. You know what I mean?
Right. And and I think it's becoming more mainstream.
Yeah,
I think there's
definitely.
definitely a lot of people who are concerned with the pesticides.
Yeah.
And like the food quality and like what are children actually being fed. And and I think that so there's a lot of people who are concerned with that. And again, we all get the opportunity to choose what we're okay with.
Right.
And safe is a relative term.
Yeah.
Like it's a relative term. Right? And sometimes, again, it's just everyone gets to pick. Like, do I want to be really concerned? Like, how far down this rabbit hole do I want to go? How natural do I want to be?
Right.
What do I want to choose to spend my money on? And, so again, it's everyone has the choice. What becomes challenging is doing, I think, the research, because it can be very time consuming to do the research to say, okay, what is the healthiest option? And then balance that with, I don't want to live in fear because that's not healthy either.
True. Yeah. And
Right?
I think it's possible to find a good balance, but it's kind of like what everyone can handle at a certain time and period. I think that's with anything. Like for one, like for me, like there's certain times where it's like I know XYZ and I've done what I can to put certain things on like autopilot to protect me and my kids. Like, okay, I've set up like specific water filters because, with the fluoride in water, or I even heard that people flush medications down the toilet and they're not able to remove the traces of like birth control and different antidepressants. And so they're in our water. And like, I don't want to expose my kids to that. So it's, what can I control reasonably,
Right.
knowing what I know. And I only know what I know because I took the time to research it before I had kids,
Right.
So, but it's like
Yeah.
everyone, and then so there's certain things I've set in place to try and protect us.
Mm-hmm.
But that's because I just so happen to be interested in health, and I've happened to be drawn towards that. I think it's a lot harder for someone who might not be interested to research it, like
Right. Well, if there's not curiosity,
yeah.
and or if there's not time, because some people it's like it's a struggle. And again, if you're putting water filtration in, there's always a certain expense
A cost, yeah.
that comes with things. And so some of it too is saying, okay, where can I afford from a resource, whether it be time or mental or whatever, to do
Yeah.
better? And I think that's a fair question to just say, okay,
Yeah.
what's one change I can make? Because
Right.
like for me, I've become a little bit more, well, some would say I'm extreme. It depends. And then compared to some, I'm like not extreme at all. But
Right. There's like a whole
there's a wide
spectrum.
spectrum.
Yeah.
And, but I have become more and more aware of certain things. But I was thinking even 10 years ago, I still used regular shampoo and conditioner for my hair. I still cleaned with
Right.
Lysol. I still,
Yeah.
like these things that are a little bit more toxic. I still did them 10
Right.
years ago. But 10 years ago,
Yeah.
I had already converted all of my makeup and skincare to be really
Yeah.
natural.
Right.
And
That's
my
kind of
laundry
like
soap was natural.
right. Like, and that's kind of like me, like and there's also seasons. Like I can go in and out of seasons of how natural I want to be. It's
Yeah.
very bizarre. Like I'll be in a season where I'm like everything is natural and like we are going strict. And then I will flow into like, well, like my son's peed in his pants 5 times and they still smell like pee. So I need some Tide soap. Like that has happened. And then I transfer back to like, okay, well, I don't want him going to school smelling like soiled pants. And I could buy new ones. Or I could just, use some Tide soap and it'll be fine. So like I go I go in and out of like when I care. For example, when my kids were babies, everything was like super strict, like all natural laundry detergent, because they also had sensitive skin with eczema and things like that.
Mhm.
And now that they're a little bit older, I've like gotten a little bit more relaxed on it. But then there's times where I'm like, no, I'm going back. So I don't know what the psychology behind that is, why I keep switching, but
I think we have different interests at different points in time and
right. Yeah.
different tolerance levels. And
Right.
some of it
Exactly.
is like, what do you feel interested in or passionate about?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it just feels overwhelming because it's like, can I change everything? And it can be a little bit like that. If you go down the quote unquote crunchy
Right.
mindset rabbit hole, it's everything is dangerous and everything. And that's not healthy or fun to live like that either.
True. Yeah. And
And so it's just finding the balance that works at any point in time,
right.
and like what's important. So, and again,
And
I
it's
would say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, sorry. I was just going to mention something that you had said before about the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And like for example, you said like, oh, I feel like I'm not, there's people who are more crunchy than me and there's people that are less. And I personally think that I'm not super crunchy. I'm like more in the middle. But when I can, like my kids' teachers thinks that I'm like over the top crunchy. So like, so it's like compared to the normal, because like I won't let them eat the snacks that they have at school because it's not organic. It's like regular
Mhm.
flour and like they're just random things, and they think I'm like odd, but it's like, so I'm like, well, I guess, and I guess maybe I am a little more than normal. So it's like, it's odd because I wouldn't necessarily think that I'm super crunchy, you know?
Right, right. I mean,
And
I still wear spandex,
and even like after my son was born and he had to go to the newborn clinic
Hmm.
where they, because he had jaundice, they wanted him to have some formula. And I was horrified by this. He was like 2 days old, and they're like, his blood glucose is so low, we're not letting you leave unless he drinks this. And the woman filled his bottle with the formula with tap water. And I was like, is that filtered water? And she's like, no. I'm like, well, where'd you get the water? She's like, from the tap. And I was literally like, you're giving my 2-day-old infant tap water. And you're telling me I can't leave. It's not even warm. And it has formula, which, of course, in my opinion, it wasn't like an organic formula. It had, soybean oils and all sorts of horrible things. And I'm just like sitting here like, oh my goodness. And I couldn't really do anything because they're like, you can't leave unless he has this.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like sometimes you get wins and sometimes
Right.
you don't. And
Yeah.
again, it's like, how far do you want to push things in a hospital? Because they can create a lot of challenges
Exactly.
for
Yes.
you. And
Exactly.
so, and I think that there's an element of like a reason why people pray over their food, and
Yeah.
like the placebo effect. Even if I believe this is good for me and this is going to be okay,
Mhm.
it's more likely to be okay.
Yes, definitely.
And then there's also the consistency, like how often is the exposure? Is it just once or twice?
Yeah,
Or is
for
it
sure.
multiple times a day, every day for years?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
or decades. Like it begins to make a difference. And
Yeah.
right. And regardless of what we want, we don't always get the choice. It's like swimming pools. Like some people are like, oh, you can't go in a swimming pool if it's chlorinated.
Right.
And
It's
it's like,
yeah.
well, like I'm not going to deprive myself or my child of all the fun they could have swimming and of all the vitamin
Yeah.
D that they're going to get and sunshine and outdoor time because they're
Right.
loving this by saying, oh, there's chlorine.
Yeah, and that was hard for me. That was a hard jump. I didn't want to put my kids in the pool, and then eventually it was the same thing. I'm like, well, they're kids. Like, I can't control everything. And I'm
Right,
still a bit neurotic where I'm like, okay, we got to shower immediately when we get home and like wash their swimsuits, but it's a balance because it at a certain point, if you are too much, you're affecting your own mental health and ability to enjoy life as well.
right, right. And so it really is the balance. So there's an awareness, because I think
Yeah.
it's very healthy and important to become aware. So that way you're at
Hmm.
least making informed decisions. And it's
Yeah.
hard to get the information to make an informed decision.
Right. It is.
And where do you start, right? It's like there's so many areas where toxicity hides or can be
Yeah.
found. There's, cleaning products, there's personal care products, there's water,
Yeah.
there's air quality,
Right.
there's pesticides, there's food quality,
Yeah.
and again, it's like even what's been coming up a lot more recently is the topic of microplastics,
Right. Yeah.
that all of us are a little bit plastic people at this point
Yeah.
because we all have elements of plastic in us that are really hard to remove.
Yeah. And I think they did a study when they were trying to do a study on microplastics, but they could not find a control group of humans that did not have microplastics. So they could not do the study.
Right? So we're all a little bit Barbie right now. Just a
Yeah.
little bit plastic. Right? And then there's the environmental concerns of certain toxicities as well. Like, is the continued pesticide use actually healthy for the earth? And Dr. Zach Bush, I believe is his name.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's the right name, right? He has some really interesting videos and information about the health of the earth as well as the health of the human, because we're kind of interconnected.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we know that pesticide use is not very healthy for humans. And glyphosate, again, has paid out millions and millions and millions in lawsuits showing that, yes, in fact, it does cause cancer.
Yeah.
And so, what was my point? I've lost track.
Zach Bush was talking about the earth.
Yeah. But there's like the health of the earth and the health of us, and also plastics, like producing and using as much plastic as we do, even just the amount of landfills that are just filled with plastic that's never going to degrade. There's also kind of the element of, one, this plastic is not good for us, but it's also not good for the earth. So it's a little bit, there's some intertwining of environmental impact along with health impact, and the practicality and ease of, because I think what stops a lot of people is they say, okay, like there's better choices, but how do I find what's actually good? Because you get told so many different things. It's like, oh no, this water filter is the best. No, this one's the best. No, this one's the best. And you're like, okay, how do I pick this? Like, how do I pick this? Or even diapers. I had like the massive diaper debacle when my daughter was born, because so there was some kind of crunchy-ish influencers who were promoting this specific type of diaper. And so I was like, okay, let me buy a few of them. And because I was like, I really want to avoid the bleach and stuff like that. That's like a little bit harsher for sure. And so let me get some, and anyways, so we have some on hand. Thankfully I did, because she came early. So we had just gotten them like a few days before.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, whew, just in time.
Yeah.
And they ended up being too big on her because she was so tiny. But and then we did end up getting some preemie diapers that were, I don't know, just regular like Target at Target or something like.
Okay, yeah.
But then as I started researching, having the space to do more research, because initially I was like, I just need to order something that seems decent. And so I did. And then I started looking into it, and I'm going, oh, okay, like these are not totally chlorine free. They're only elemental chlorine free, which means they still have these other compounds whose names I can't pronounce that can cause skin irritations and stuff like that. So I was like, I think for me, I want totally chlorine free.
Right.
So then we found a brand and started using that. And then that gave her a rash.
Oh, no.
And so then I was like, okay, back to the drawing board.
Yeah.
And so then we switched again. And so, but I'm going like in that process, because I also wanted them to be ones that were easy to use and felt good and that were comfortable. And, and I'm going, I don't mind spending a little extra money, and I don't want to be spending obscene amounts on diapers either.
Yeah.
And then, and then there was the question of like, oh, these ones are compostable. And and if you mail them back to the company, they'll compost them for you.
Oh, wow.
More research, and you're like, oh, well, with disposable diapers, only so much of it is compostable. So really the healthiest option is cloth.
Cloth diapering, yeah.
And I'm
which
going,
is like
okay, I don't have energy
job.
for cloth. Yeah. I just don't have energy for that.
I don't know how people do it. I commend
too much for me.
Yeah.
Too much for me. I'm like, I can't do that. Then if you're trying to be environmentally friendly, what about all the extra water that you use? It's like, I mean, you can go really far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, for me, we're not real. I would love to be able to do composting, but we're not really super in an easy position to do composting as where we currently are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going, that's fine. We don't need to compost the diapers. That's fine. I'm not overly concerned about that right now. But let me just get one that doesn't irritate her skin, that's totally chlorine free and made with high quality ingredients, and the company is transparent with everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a big piece too, is the transparency. Can you find out what's actually in the product you're using?
Right.
And because it's fair to at least have the opportunity to research the ingredients.
For sure. I agree.
I think that's a big piece. And, and then it's like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Yeah. And what is your, like you were saying, like with the cloth diapering, like what is your capacity? Because I had a much larger capacity for taking the time and doing everything natural and crunchy with my daughter. But then when I added a second child, like it became much more difficult because it was more so like I'm like in survival mode. Also, going like, I'm a single mom. So like my capacity for like my ability to I knew the right decision, but it's like I don't have the capacity anymore. So with my daughter, it was like every baby food was puree. Like I made it from scratch. I steamed the vegetables, went to the grocery store, like had the glass containers, and I would freeze them and have them all in the storage. And I think I did that once for my son when I had a good day where I was like, okay, I have the time and the mental capacity. But when I couldn't do that, I opted for like the Serenity baby pouches, which was still a good choice. Like it wasn't Gerber, and it wasn't the ones that were like filled with heavy metals and things like that. Like it was a good company who were they were transparent and they had good ingredients, but it wasn't my ideal. I would have loved to have like had everything been homemade, but like I didn't have the capacity. So I tried to take like, okay, what's the next best thing? And the next best thing I could find was like this organic Serenity baby pouches. And with all the heavy metals and stuff in baby products, it's very alarming.
It's very alarming. Like it's, and I think because I think the reason why people are saying, hey, we need to pressure the regulatory agencies and the companies to do better is because not everybody has the capacity to do a lot of research.
Right. So it should be standard.
Or to have the contacts or the connections to someone who has done the research.
Right.
Like they have found heavy metals in baby formulas. They have found, heavy metals in baby foods. They've actually also recently found heavy metals in a lot of the spices, even at more organic and healthy grocery stores.
Wow. Yeah.
And, it's just even in toothbrushes.
Oh my goodness.
Microplastics. And there's been like a big thing lately about Glide floss is full of PFASs. PFA. And, and that one was a hard one for me personally to switch.
Right.
Because I've tried more natural flosses in the past and I felt like they always would get like a little stuck between my teeth. I'm going, they're all too wide. Like they're just too wide. It's just not easy. It hurts. I get them in, but then can hardly get them back out. And so I was really resistant to making the change on that one. And do you really want microplastics in your mouth? Probably not.
Probably not.
And I'm going, okay. So I told my husband, I said, if we can find one that actually is not horrible to use, that isn't painful for me to use to get between my teeth, I would be happy to switch. And I said, I just haven't found one before. And I've tried probably like a dozen natural flosses previously. And I just end up throwing them all away because I'm like, I can't use this. And so we did find one that I like.
Oh, awesome. You'll have to let me know because I'm curious.
Yeah, it's Dr. Tung's, Tung.
Okay.
And it's pretty good.
Okay, cool.
It's a little thicker. So I have to switch out the pieces between teeth because it will kind of get a bit frayed.
Okay.
But overall, I like it. So I said, okay, this one's good enough. I'm willing to switch.
Yeah.
But I was resistant to that. I was really resistant to that because I was like, oh my goodness. Like,
yeah. And that's the problem is sometimes it comes down to like functionality. And it's unfortunate that sometimes like the more mainstream products are more effective. And that's where I get caught. I think that's when I flow back and forth because it's like, if it's not, and it's unfortunate, but because the things that are making it more functional is most likely chemicals and things that they've come up with, like microplastics that aren't good for us. But it's like sometimes it's more functional, so it's really tricky.
Yeah, it can be a lot of trial and error of finding natural products that really work well.
Yeah.
Of like, do I like this one? Do I like how it works? Do I like, and so there can be a lot of trial and error. Like, again, back to the diapers, like I donated so many packs of diapers, like hundreds of dollars worth of diapers where we used a handful of them. And I'm like, no, I don't like them.
Yeah.
On to the next one. Right. So again, there's this balance of like, how intense do you want to be?
Right. And
about something.
Yeah.
And
it's unfortunate that they make the crunchier products more expensive. That's the thing and it really just comes down to like the mass production, I'm assuming, where the larger corporations, they're mass producing things and they can sell them for a lower price. And some of the companies
some of it may be ingredients too. There may be certain ingredients that are just
more expensive
because they're more expensive.
Yeah, I think the quality definitely makes sense. But like when it comes down to diapers, like I really wish there was a way to make the more natural diapers more affordable because it almost comes off like a luxury. Like
it comes off like premium.
Yeah, like if you're struggling. Yeah, like if you're struggling financially, you're not gonna buy the coterie diapers or like the Honest Company diapers. Like price per diaper, it's outrageous compared to like the Walmart brand, for example, or the Huggies. And some people are just like, I can't afford that. So like,
and it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
So, and if you're doing it in every area of life of saying, I need to be healthier in every area of life, it does start to add up because organic food is a little bit more expensive. And the diapers and the skincare and the cleaning products. And if you're adding just $1 or $2 here and there, but it's on everything, it really does start to add up, which again becomes a question for people of where do I want to prioritize?
Right.
And, where do I have the bandwidth and the resources to get a little deeper into this and do really well? And where is it okay to slide, scale a little bit?
Right. For me, I'm like pretty hard stop. Like I will pay extra for organic food that I'm buying myself. Now, if I'm eating out, I'm like a little more flexible or certain things, but I try and always.
We were a lot. I was a lot pickier. Now I was throwing up so much when I was pregnant. We didn't eat out a whole lot.
Right.
We were more picky.
While you were pregnant.
While I was pregnant, minus the point in time where we had moved to Chattanooga and we're living in a hotel because we didn't have a kitchen. Yeah. And then it was kind of like we ate takeout and we ate some like pretty crappy food.
Yeah. Yeah.
For like those 2 weeks, which is not ideal. And it was like It was
Yeah.
like throw up your hands and go, I don't know, we need to try and eat something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like convenience too. It goes back to the same thing. But it's like if I'm going to, like, my kids love treats. Like, let's just be real, okay? Like, I tried for so long to not let them be exposed to sugar, and it lasted with my daughter. But by the time my son came around, it's just all bets are off. But I at least try, like, I would prefer, like, I also like, cookies or whatever. Like, say if we're gonna have cookies or muffins, I would much rather make them myself. So at least if it's organic sugar, it's organic flour,
Yeah.
it's olive oil in there. So at least I can control those things opposed to like soybean oil or, high fructose corn syrup, whatever type of flour that's not organic. Like, that's a huge difference
Yeah.
with the ingredients. So it's like they might not be eating the healthiest thing in the world, but at least I know everything that's in it and it's made with organic ingredients.
Right.
And it's actually cheaper if you're buying the organic flour and everything to make it yourself than buy like the prepackaged as
Right.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then you know everything that's in it. And you know what? There's also the joy in life and in
Yeah.
of like the special treats and the things that are yummy and like
Right.
like I loved that as a kid too, like coming home and my mom had made fresh bread or
Yeah.
cookies or something and it's like,
Right.
and I didn't want to be limited. Like I remember once I ate like 9 brownies.
Yeah.
And because they were delicious.
Yeah.
And I didn't do that every day.
Right.
But that one day I was like, oh my goodness, these are so good. And I love that no one told me, you have to stop. That's too much sugar. That's not healthy. It's whatever, right? Like, so I think.
And this could be a whole nother episode about food because I don't restrict my kids' food. And that is like, I'm realizing that that's kind of not mainstream either. Like, I'm like, you want a snack? Have a snack. Like, I will never, if my kids are hungry, be like, oh, it's almost dinner or you just ate. Like, why are you hungry again? Like, I'm just like, you're hungry? Go for it. Because I don't want to create any sort of food issues, which we could probably talk about in a whole other episode.
Right. No, it's definitely a thing of like letting children decide when they're full and then they can stop eating.
Yeah.
And decide when they're hungry and when they're not, and this connection to your body. And
because who am I to say you've had enough? Like, I don't know if they're going through growth spurt today or if they ran extra. Like, there's so many factors. And I don't believe that limiting food, I think it can end up having the opposite effect.
yeah, well, and there's no need to create a scarcity around food. And I also don't necessarily believe in, finish your plate. It's like, okay,
I don't believe in that either. I'm like, you're done.
You're done. And sometimes I do that for myself and I'm going, there's like one bite left, literally one bite left.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous that I leave that behind, but I'm like, I'm full now.
Yeah.
Like
and
to eat that last bite would be overeating. So I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. That's perfectly okay. And
like, does anyone else want this last bite?
Yeah.
Is anyone else hungry for just one bite more? No.
And that's like intuitive eating, I guess. And that's what we want to model for our children. And I think, I think it can lead to a lot of negative relationship with food. If you control it too much or you force them to finish their food, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even for quality of food, I'm going, sometimes it's like, is this the best food? No. Do we eat this all the time? No.
Right.
And we're going to eat it right now for this reason.
Because and to not feel guilty.
Or because of whatever. And we're going to trust that we are resilient. And our bodies can manage a lot and work through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to go with that as well. And again, if you eat McDonald's or any other fast food
every day or
like 3 times or 4 times a week,
Yeah.
Again, is that the healthiest thing? And also, I think during pregnancy, I've heard from a lot of women who have said, "Oh, I'm pregnant. It doesn't matter if I get, the 3-letter F word, if I gain
Right.
weight, so to speak. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter because I'm pregnant and I'm gaining weight anyways. So I'm going to eat
Right.
fast food every day."
Yeah.
And I also look at that and say, you are doing yourself a massive disservice. You are doing
Right.
the coming generation and your
Yeah.
contribution to that generation a massive disservice
Right.
by eating really low density foods,
Yeah.
like
I
low
agree.
nutrient density foods is what I'm.
Yeah. And I mean, the chemicals and like, is that even, I mean, haven't eaten McDonald's in probably like 10 years or more, but I will eat
Yeah.
like Chick-fil-A. Now, I don't know why I think Chick-fil-A is better because it's probably not, but I've convinced myself that it is. But, but I think that that's a huge misconception because it's like it does matter what you eat when you're pregnant, you know. Of course you can indulge every now and then, but you are eating for two, but you want to be eating healthy foods.
Right.
And
And
high protein because your body is making more blood. It's your blood supply doubles.
yeah,
And if you don't eat enough protein, you're going to get anemic, or that could lead to like preeclampsia and all sorts of complications in your pregnancy. But they do not talk about nutrition and pregnancy at all.
it's really an avoided topic.
Yeah.
Even with a midwife, I found like there was
Yeah.
very little discussion of what I was eating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even
Mhm.
for example, like for people who have HG, or I don't know how to say it's not HG, it's when you're extremely sick during pregnancy and vomiting every day.
Oh, hyperemesis.
Yes, yeah. So
Mhm.
even people who have that, and some women can't keep anything down for weeks, days. I know you had really bad in your pregnancy. And I mean, they're not really doing anything. They're just like OBs are just kind of like, "Oh, that's pregnancy." But it's like,
Or here, take this medication.
yeah, take Zofran or whatever and you'll stop throwing up. But it's like, okay, but what about the effects of not eating for this many days? Like that can't be good for you.
Well, and the hydration issues, like,
Yeah. And I
it,
know a
it
lot of women get hospitalized for it and put on IVs for that very
yeah,
reason.
yeah. Yeah, I possibly at one point should have been, but I was like, I cannot get myself out of this house. And
Yeah.
Ian was working, here,
Yeah.
and I was still in Georgia at the time. And I was like, I don't have the energy to get in the
Right.
car and drive somewhere and try and research where to go. I'm like, I don't have the
Yeah.
capacity. I didn't even have the capacity to think of someone who could help me.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm just going to lay really still and drink water. And as long as I can keep water down today,
I'll
I'll,
make it. Yeah. Yeah. It's really intense.
and I think it's also, because I've had people say, post, whatever, they're like, you must have been really toxic before you got pregnant. If you had
People have
done a
said
better,
that.
yes, healthcare providers, if you had done a better detox, you wouldn't have been so sick. So next time, maybe
Oh my
you'll
God.
think about that and do better.
That's absurd.
And I'm going, like, I have in the past also read that, yes, like having a bit of a detox before becoming pregnant can decrease slightly the morning sickness type symptoms.
Hmm.
And generally, going into pregnancy in a very healthy state and
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of nutrients is a positive thing, because
Yeah.
you have more to offer the growing baby whose brain and neurology and
Mm-hmm.
all of that is developing. So I'm all for going into pregnancy as healthy as possible.
Yeah.
And I don't think that detoxing pre-pregnancy fixes everything for everyone. And I think also to say that is very harmful to people.
Because it puts the blame on you when it's not. It's something that can happen to anyone.
There's a lot of different reasons for things. Like, why was I so sick?
Yeah.
Like the whole pregnancy.
Right.
Hard to say exactly. And
yeah, I mean, I was pretty sick with both my pregnancies, so I know it's not fun at all.
And I'm going, I don't know. I went into it very healthy.
Yeah.
And I ate for what I could keep down. I ate as good as possible through my pregnancy. And then I've tried to eat as good as possible postpartum too. Though initially postpartum, I just said, you know what? I don't care. If I want a cookie, I'm eating a cookie. If I want to eat pie, I'm eating pie. I'm just eating whatever makes me feel good emotionally. I don't care if I'm emotional eating. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was kind of like that too at certain points. I'm like, today we're getting a treat because it was a bad day.
So I just didn't care.
Gotta get through.
Like in the first 3 months postpartum, I was like, I just don't care. I'm like, I'm going to eat organic.
Yeah.
I'm going to drink plenty of water.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just don't care. It's like whatever. If I'm eating for comfort, I don't care. This is the time I'm saying this is allowed.
Yeah.
And be strict with myself another day.
Right. Yeah, that's not the time. And you're trying to replenish all those lost nutrients from the birth, from being pregnant.
Yeah.
From breastfeeding.
And is eating sugar the best way to do that? No. But there's also an element of like, I can actually eat again. I can eat down again, which actually took me almost a month postpartum till I actually could really keep food down.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, which I think is unusual, but so when I could actually eat again, I was super excited. And
oh yeah, I bet.
And I mean, we're a year, 13 months now postpartum. And so are we eating much, much healthier again? Yes. Like a lot more vegetables and like really trying to get the nutrient density and homemade bone broth and
I love that.
sea moss and like really trying to up that. And I'm taking vitamins again, which took me a while to get to the point where I could take vitamins without getting really nauseous, even postpartum. So
yeah, vitamins are hard. And even now I have to make sure I have a full stomach before I take them. Otherwise I will feel like I'm about to vomit.
Yeah, I didn't have as much issue with that pre-pregnancy, but I'm still like working up to being able to take more, but it's an interesting thing. So I think again, there's like you've said, there's the flow of things.
And I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was extremely down the rabbit hole of iodine deficiency in the US.
Yeah.
And how iodine helps with the brain development and IQ. So I was like taking iodine drops my whole pregnancy. And like
I did some of that pre-pregnancy.
Okay,
where I rolled it on because the girl I'm seeing for abdominal massage, which wasn't Charlotte. There was someone else who was actually in the building that I worked in.
Cool.
Was trained by the same lady as Charlotte, who was
awesome.
For the listeners, if you've not seen the episode with Charlotte, it was the final episode of season 1, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So you can always go back and listen and learn more about that. But as part of the abdominal massage for the lady I was seeing, she had recommended rolling on iodine. So I did do some of that pre-pregnancy, and I didn't really do any during pregnancy, I don't think. But I definitely did it pre.
Yeah, I was like I just realized I should probably start taking iodine again because like I've heard it can do miraculous things like kill cancer cells and it's good for your IQ and there's a whole bunch of benefits to iodine. But it's interesting talking about pregnancy nutrition. I also heard that, folic acid is super important, especially in the very early days. I've heard, now I'm not sure if this is true, but I've heard that there is a connection with like tongue ties and lip ties and folic acid deficiency, because the time period when those are developed is right in those early weeks, and when a lot of women don't even know they're pregnant. So if you're not having enough folic acid, and it's interesting because I got pregnant with my son within 2 years of my daughter, and I don't think that's ideal nutritionally for it to replenish your nutritional stores. And I was also breastfeeding my daughter still while I got pregnant, and my son had a lip and tongue tie. So I always wonder if it was because of the fact that I was depleted in folic acid when I got pregnant. And I mean, I don't know if it's proven. It could just be a theory, and it could be a theory that I'm choosing to believe, and maybe it's not true. But it's interesting because there's been a huge rise. Like nowadays, it seems like everyone has a lip and tongue tie.
Right.
Very common.
I think, again, I think some of it comes back to as well, like also the quality of the vitamins we're taking. Because I've also seen people who have been prescribed vitamins, like, oh, go buy this brand. It's a great vitamin. And when you look at the ingredients, it's red dye, whatever, inside the vitamin.
Oh
and
my
I'm
goodness.
going, okay, probably not the best quality vitamin.
Right. Yeah.
And so again, it's like it consistently lands on the consumer to find the healthier or healthiest option.
Yeah.
And it's really a lot of pressure on consumers. And it's also very empowering because then we get to choose and say, okay, what are, and there are apps that exist that help scan different things and say, oh, we've looked at these ingredients and these are the things to be concerned of. Like even certain cosmetic companies will list a never list and say,
parabens,
these things because of these reasons. And they might have a list of 50 ingredients. So there are resources, I think, that can make the research easier. Great. And, and again, it kind of just lands on each of us individually to say, how healthy do we want our family to be? How concerned are we with environmental toxins?
Yeah.
How concerned are we with creating generational health? And what is our bandwidth for tackling these issues? Where do we want to start? What's an easy place to start?
Yeah.
Because most of it doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
But even making a small change.
Yeah.
Like stopping drinking sodas.
Right. Yeah.
Or like pop,
Or just like a climate, acclimating your taste buds to water again.
Right? Like adequate water intake and making sure that the water is filtered.
Yeah.
At least moderately filtered. It's still going to be better than just pure tap water. And so it's like sometimes perfection isn't required. Sometimes it's just 10 or 20% better in this area and this area. And then when you feel bandwidth and interest, you get to say, oh, now I'm going to tackle this other thing.
Right. And how much, you say it's too overwhelming to change everything. Like you said, start with one thing, or maybe it's too much to take things away. Maybe think about adding. What can you add? Like if you're maybe just adding a high quality multivitamin. I mean, that could go a long way for someone.
Yeah. Can go a long way. Maybe taking away one thing and adding one thing.
Right. Yeah.
And they often say adding is easier than taking away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it can make, I think, small changes consistently over time begin to make a big difference. And it also, I think, begins to teach our children, one, we don't need to be afraid. Yeah. Because epigenetically, there's also our emotional state has a lot to do with things too. Like people who are really lonely, and it's actually really interesting research. They actually have higher risk of heart issues and stuff like
I
that.
believe it. And even stress, if you are doing everything right and your stress and cortisol levels are through the roof,
Yeah.
you're not healthy.
It's but it harms everyone, right? So how do we do this? How do we put a little effort towards being healthier, which I truly do believe is important, and to teach our children how to live healthy and how to think about how they pick food so that they can also learn as they grow into hopefully healthy, happy, fulfilled adults, but we're also teaching them how to manage stress, which is also key. And when to say, you know what, this is okay. We can do this. Our bodies are strong. We know what's okay for us. And like begin to follow that intuition of, you know what, you said this didn't sit well with you. Let's try something else. Like maybe you don't do well with broccoli. Maybe you do better with asparagus, and that's fine.
Right. Like, for example, I got my kids these like superfood smoothies, and my daughter loved it. And my son was like, it made my tummy hurt. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why, but you won't eat it then.
There's, something in it that didn't sit right.
Yeah, it just didn't sit well.
Yeah. And I love that. And I think that is, I think it's an empowering place to come from the spot of saying, we get to pick what's in our environment. We have control over a lot, including how we think about things and how we talk about things and what we choose. And there's a lot of control over that, including our own perspectives and level of stress that we push on ourselves.
Yes.
And, so it's really finding the information and making an informed choice. Also includes saying, how informed am I on what's going on in my body and my mind and my life and the lives of my child? And how stressful is this to change something? And, and then making choices, small and consistent choices.
Yeah.
As the interest and passion, and finding people who've maybe done the research for us.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes that's all it takes. Someone you trust.
And say, okay, you know what? You've done the research. You've got this. I'm going to go with your recommendation.
Yeah.
And that makes it easy. And you say, okay, because getting frozen in indecision or inability to make it can also, prolong the process of making healthier choices too.
And sometimes you can just follow your intuition. Like, I find that a lot of times I'm intuitively led towards what me or my kids need. And there's not, I don't necessarily have a reason behind it, but I'm just kind of like, I feel like right now we need more, I don't know, we need to eat more protein, or I feel right now we need, we need to do a little detox, or it's very interesting how that happens.
Yeah, I love that though. That's amazing.
And maybe that's why I swing so much. To just go through random.
We're going like, what is needed right now? How do I, but that's ultimately a beautiful way of doing it. And
right.
Very, very simple to just really into that trust and flow with, what does my body need today? What feels good? What, and flow with that. And I think
everyone around,
I think that's beautiful.
Everyone around me, including my babysitter, knows where I go. Like, she'll tell you, like, I'll go on these tangents, my parents included. It's like, oh, she's on one of her tangents. We're cutting up everything. I change everything, and I'm like, we are on like a no screen time. Like, know this, we're going out, we're grounding. And they're like, my babysitter's like, what happened? You're on one of your tangents again. You know what? Just go with it, because we're switching up all the rules. Within reason, obviously. Like, I try not to like stress out my kids. I have been known to do that.
We're in a new rhythm right now. Just everybody jump in my river. This is how we're flowing.
I'll further notice. This is how it is. Why? Don't ask. This is how it is right now.
That's so funny. Oh, I love that. I love that. I think that feels like a perfect place to close.
Yes, yeah.
Oh my
Well, I
goodness.
think we came up with some great topic ideas for further episodes. So we'll have to.
I mean, this is such a huge topic. We could break
Yeah.
down so many pieces
Mhm.
and definitely do a lot with this in the future and get more nitty gritty with things.
Yeah, for sure.
Go into the weeds a bit, but yay. So this was fun.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for listening. We so appreciate that. We appreciate you being on this journey with us. And we're hoping that the video quality, if I did it right, comes out better this time. So we'll and yeah, if you're loving the podcast, then do go ahead and subscribe and follow us. You can follow us on social media as well. And all of that will be in the notes for this episode. And yes, thank you for everyone for listening and for joining us. And we can't wait to see you again next week.